Hi all, my name is Craig and I am a CBT therapist and an EMDR therapist at Newham Talking Therapies.
Hello, my name's Ian. I'm one of the senior CBT therapists here at Newham Talking Therapies, and along with my colleague Craig, we just want to talk you through some of the things that we think might be really helpful in ways of managing our well-being whilst we're under this new government lockdown.
In light of the COVID crisis, we're all very stressed about it, lots of uncertainty, lots of changes to our usual routines. Naturally we're going to feel anxious, and some of us might feel a bit low in mood because of what's happening. There's a lot more isolation and big changes to our working day, changes in our daily relationships. We might not be able to do the things that we usually do, which might bring us joy and pleasure, senses of achievement, feelings of closeness to others, all which are very good for your mental well-being. Usual advice would be to do more stuff, engage, go outdoors, go out with friends, but because of the government's strong advice not to go out and not to meet friends, we're going to show you techniques, how to manage your mood, how to manage uncertainty, how to manage self-isolation. So hold that thought and we'll take it from there.
One of the things I think will be really helpful is setting some ground rules at home. Having an open and honest conversation with the people that you live with about how you plan to manage your day. So that might be how you relate to each other, the kind of things you might talk about in conversation, setting some boundaries, and just looking at how you deal with each other on a day-to-day basis. Things are going to change now that we're all living together a little bit more than we might normally do. So setting some boundaries in of what's on topic for the conversation, maybe not looking at talking about COVID so much. It's in the news a lot. So maybe just setting some real boundaries about how we communicate with each other.
There's a lot of fake news going on around at the moment, and there's lots of inaccurate advice and accurate advice. So it's a good idea to make sure that you know which sources are okay to use and which ones aren't. So you might get a lot of news items on your social media feed, and just be careful to make sure you research where those news items come from, if they're fake news or not. There's some very good websites called Fact Check, and there's another one called Snopes that look at news items and tell you whether they're fake or not. If something seems really sensational and over the top and you think, oh, that doesn't sound quite right, do check. And remember to go on the government website and NHS websites to make sure you're getting more up-to-date information about the COVID crisis. They're the credible sources, because it can be very anxiety-provoking, it can scare us, and it can cause a lot of uncertainty among everybody else, and there's already a lot of uncertainty going on at the moment. So just be careful about where your sources of information come from.
Another thing to be really mindful of is how we're behaving with each other and with ourselves during this time. Sometimes we can engage in what we think is helpful behaviours, but actually they're not doing us many favours at all. One of those things is checking the news, and as Craig has just mentioned there about getting your facts right, it's also important to think about how much of those facts you're getting on a daily basis. So really thinking about how often you're checking the news. What might be helpful is to think about just checking those news stories once a day. 6 o'clock news tends to have all the information that we might need about what's going on at the moment. All the updates tend to come in around about that time. So maybe limiting our news checking once a day and looking at 6 o'clock news to do that.
The next thing we were going to talk about is that who you're going to talk about the virus with, how you're going to talk about it. One of the things we would suggest is maybe agreeing with your family members that you'll only talk about the virus at certain times of day, maybe after the 6 o'clock news like we suggested earlier, or any news item where you sit down and take in the summary of the day. And then, just as a suggestion, you could plan with your family just to talk about the virus after that and how you're going to respond to it, and make a plan, and maybe limit your time talking about the virus to just that time, so that you're not talking about it all day and feeling anxious and uncertain about the situation. That is our advice there.
I don't know if you're anything like me, but sometimes if I think I'm coming down with something, I might pay more attention to particular symptoms, like, blocked nose or any aches or fever or anything like that. And what I think would be a really helpful thing to think about at this time is to just watch and catch ourselves. Are we doing that too much? Are we paying too much attention to our physical health, more than we might normally do? It would make perfect sense to be more mindful about things like this because we're constantly surrounded by these news stories. But again, with limiting these other areas that we're talking about, it'd be really helpful to limit the amount of time we might spend focusing on any physical health symptoms.
Our next point was about binge watching TV. There's been a lot of news about this on social media, that it'd be great to sit down and binge watch all Netflix series, and it's been made much easier to go and watch Netflix and Amazon Prime and all those things anyway. We're not saying don't watch programs on Netflix, because we all do that, but it's just about mixing up watching your series on Netflix and doing other things as well. Watching stuff on Netflix gives you a real sense of enjoyment. Binge watching all TV on iPlayer and More4 and all those things gives you a sense of enjoyment. But remember, we need to also get a balance of senses of achievement and closeness to other people. So just be aware that you don't want to be going too much down the enjoyment line, because you want to get that balance. To be mentally well, you also need to get some senses of achievement, like you're doing something, you're being creative, you're actually fixing something or clearing out cupboards or something like that, and closeness to other people. So binge watching on your own is going to take that away. So you could watch TV with somebody else, or take time out of watching TV to have some conversations with people, have a discussion, FaceTime a family member that you haven't spoken to for a long time. Just try and get that balance.
So we talked a little bit there about some of the unhelpful behaviours we can notice and get involved with, but let's think about some of the more helpful and more kind of well-being type based behaviours that we can start to look at as well. The first one I want to mention is routine. It's really important, especially at times like this, that we try and keep to our typical routine. So for example, if you would get out of bed at 7 or 8 in the morning and you're no longer having to do that to get to work, it might be still helpful to just get up and continue that routine and have a focus going forward. Routine is really, really helpful for well-being. Having breakfast at a certain time, going to bed at the same sort of time every day, and just continuing this pattern on a daily basis, regardless of whether you need to get up for a particular thing or not, just really establishing that healthy routine with you and all of your family members.
One other important thing is to keep our mind quite focused on things when we are not doing our usual activities like work or going to the gym or doing our evening courses or whatever you were doing usually to keep your mind focused. We need to try and introduce some activities that would help our mind focus. If we don't do that, then our minds will just wander off and we'll start thinking about random stuff and we'll get confused. You're more likely to get anxious, you're more likely to ruminate on things, you're more likely to dwell on negative stuff, more likely to get anxious and worry about other things. So try and engage in some activities during the day that really focus your mind, and we've got some examples here of what you can do. We were thinking that keeping a diary, a journal, writing a blog or a video diary, a vlog they call them I think, do something like that you can put your thoughts down on paper, video your thoughts, keep a journal of all the things you're doing, how life's changed since the COVID crisis, what you're doing differently, how you feel about that, what you've noticed in other people, what you've noticed in the wider society, what you've noticed on the news. Write all that down. It'll be really useful information anyway for us to reflect back on how we coped and survived the COVID crisis. Being focused in a situation like this can produce quite a bit of creativity. Shakespeare wrote King Lear while he was in isolation during the plague, and Sir Isaac Newton created calculus and the theory of gravity while in lockdown during another plague. And actually Sir Isaac Newton described this period of his life as the most intellectually productive period, so it can have some positives.
Something else that's really important at a time like this is keeping in touch with loved ones. There's lots of ways to do that. Obviously there's going to be sometimes people in our house that we can keep in touch with, but for those family members that we can't really go and see now at the moment, maybe using things like FaceTime, WhatsApp video chats, Skype, anything that you might have available to you that just allows you to break down that barrier and have face-to-face contact. I know when I've done it myself, I've felt a lot better from seeing the person on the screen rather than just talking on the phone, and we have that technology available to us, most of us do. So really just engaging with that now, maybe more than we did before, and who knows, maybe that'll change the future as we go forward with communication anyway. The other thing to think about is some movement, and just being kind of mindful of the fact that we might be spending a little bit more time now sat down, a bit more stationary than we might have been before. One of the things that we're going to put on the website is some gentle movement techniques called mindfulness movement. And we'll talk you through a process of movement that might just be helpful for you, but also helpful for your physical well-being as well during this time.
Another thing we've found and discovered, which is great, is the London Buddhist Centre is live streaming their talks and meditations. And I think they're looking to offer this on Monday, Wednesday and Friday evening, so have a look at that. But just generally look at introducing more mindfulness-based techniques into your day. We're going to put a couple of mindfulness meditations and breathing exercises on our website, so you can try that. There's a couple of apps, there's Headspace and there is Calm. They're very good at showing you how to do mindfulness, so have a look at those. You can get some free mindfulness exercises on those, but also on YouTube there's some mindfulness exercises and mindful meditations. One person to particularly look out for is John Kabat-Zinn. He's the mindfulness guru, so have a look at that and yeah, see how you get on.